The winter of 1000 CE, a Norse crew makes landfall on the northern tip of what we now call Newfoundland. Open sea crossing complete, temperature dropping below minus 15 Celsius. Wind off the Labrador Current cutting through any gap in clothing in under 60 seconds. No synthetic insulation, no sleeping bag rated for sub-zero temperatures, no heated shelter, no rescue if something went wrong. Every single person on that landing party was alive at dawn. The evidence of that settlement, timber framing, iron rivets, a smithy, a cooking pit, was excavated by Helge and Anne Ingstad beginning in 1960 and confirmed as Norse by carbon-14 dating through Parks Canada. The site is called L'Anse aux Meadows. Brigitte Lindroth-Wallace, the lead archaeologist for Parks Canada on this site, published her definitive analysis in 2003 under the title Westward Vikings. The crew that built those structures and slept on that ground survived conditions that would kill an unprotected person in the time it takes to walk to the end of a dark street. The question should be bothering you right now, because you probably own a sleeping bag. You probably paid somewhere between $100 and $300 for it. Cold weather rated, proprietary insulation, brand name fill with a marketing budget behind it, and you have probably still been cold in it. A Norse crew paid nothing for what kept them warm. They were already sleeping inside it, on the crossing before they made landfall. And in the years around 1910, the outdoor equipment industry looked at that system and made a decision. Not that it did not work, that it could not be sold. There is one physical property of raw wool that no synthetic insulation manufactured since has ever replicated. The outdoor gear industry knows exactly what it is. They have no financial reason to explain it to you. What you're about to understand costs nothing if you already own a wool blanket, and under $15 if you do not. And it is coming up. Every technique a Norse crew carried on an open ocean voyage was stress tested by conditions that do not negotiate. Sub-zero temperatures for weeks at a stretch. Salt spray that saturates everything on deck within the first hour of rough weather. Wind that strips warmth from the human body at 7 times the rate of still air at the same temperature. No hospital, no rescue, no fallback position of any kind. If their sleeping system failed, the crew did not get cold, not struggled, died. Neil Price, writing in The Viking Way, published by Cambridge University Press in 2019, documents Norse material culture as one built entirely around practical engineering under survival pressure. These were not people who kept traditions out of sentiment or habit. They kept techniques because the alternative was an unrecoverable failure 1,000 miles from any shore that could help them. The outdoor equipment industry of the early 20th century understood this perfectly well. Companies like Abercrombie and Fitch, which had been supplying expedition gear from New York since 1892, published gear catalogs around 1910 that standardized cotton sleeping bags as the modern choice for cold weather sleep. Not because the wool system the Norse had used did not work, not because something better came along, because cotton bags could be manufactured cheaply, stored without special care, sold at a reliable margin, and replaced every few seasons when they degraded. The wool system was reclassified as outdated. The replacement was not more effective, it was more sellable. That is suppression by economics, not conspiracy, economics. The difference matters. And the part the industry hoped you would never ask, exactly how wool does what it does in the condition that kills people, is what comes next. But here is what the industry hoped you would never ask specifically. Why does it work? Not that it works. They know you already half suspect it works. The mechanism is the thing they buried in the same catalogs that pushed cotton bags as modern. That mechanism is coming up. This is not a new idea. The Norse did not invent wool, but they were among the first people in the archaeological record to engineer it into a specific, documented system for sustained cold weather survival at sea. And the evidence has been sitting in museums since 1880. When Nikolai Nikolaisen excavated the Gokstad ship burial in that year, a vessel built around 890 CE, now held at the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, the burial goods included textile fragments recovered alongside the ship's equipment. Among those fragments was vadmal, a dense, tightly woven woolen cloth documented in the Gragas, the Icelandic law code compiled around 1117 CE. Vadmal was so fundamental to Norse life that Gragas specified it as legal tender. 6 ells of standard grade vadmal was the documented unit of exchange for trade goods across the Norse world. Think about what that means. You do not make your sleeping material your legal currency unless losing access to it threatens your ability to function entirely. Lisa Bender-Jurgensen, whose 1992 study, North European Textiles Until AD 1000, published by Aarhus University Press, remains the primary academic analysis of pre-medieval Nordic textile technology. Documents vadmal production as a consistent feature of Norse household economies from Scandinavia to Iceland to the Greenlandic colonies. Every Norse household produced it. Every Norse ship carried it. Every Norse crew that crossed open water slept inside it. The weight varied by intended use. Lighter cloth for clothing, heavier for sail and sleeping. But the base material was identical. The same sheep, the same fiber, the same physical properties that made it work at sea. Els Rosdahl, writing in The Vikings, published by Penguin in 1987, documents the relationship between Norse material culture and cold weather endurance as inseparable from the textile tradition. The clothing, the sleeping material, the ship's sail, in documented cases, the same fabric repurposed by condition and necessity. A sail that caught the wind on the crossing became a sleeping cover at anchor. Nothing about that transition was incidental. It was the system. Viking crews solved cold weather sleep permanently. Then, one industry made that permanent solution inconvenient. Not wrong, inconvenient. Because you cannot charge a billing cycle for something that grows on a sheep, outlasts a sleeping bag by 4 decades, and works better wet than anything the gear industry produces dry. Every Norse crew operating those trade and settlement routes solved cold weather sleep without paying anyone, without a supplier, without a fill rating, without a replacement schedule. The average person today spends between $150 and $400 every 4 to 6 years on cold weather sleep gear that compresses with use, loses its insulation rating gradually, and becomes nearly useless the moment it absorbs condensation inside a tent. Norse crews paid nothing. The physics has not changed by a single variable since 900 CE, and almost nobody is using it. If you have not subscribed to this channel, this is what we do here. Every video is built from documented sources, named historians, and verified evidence from the Norse period. If that matters to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. You have worn a wool sweater in light rain and noticed your core stayed warm longer than you expected. You probably assumed that was because you were already warm from moving. It was not. That was the wool. You have picked up a wool blanket from a cold shelf and noticed it felt warmer than the cotton one sitting next to it, even though both had been in the same room at the same temperature for hours. You probably assumed you imagined it. You did not. Here is how wool does what it does. It fits in one sentence, and once you hear it, you will not be able to not notice it everywhere. When wool fiber absorbs moisture, from your breath, from your skin, from the air trapped inside a closed sleeping system, it releases heat. Not a metaphor, not a marketing claim. A documented exothermic chemical reaction called the heat of sorption. The fiber structure of wool contains hygroscopic cells at the microscopic level that absorb water vapor and, in doing so, release measurable thermal energy directly against the surface they are touching, which, inside a sealed wool sleeping system, is you. The result is that a damp wool layer generates more warmth than a dry synthetic layer at the same temperature. Scientists call this the heat of sorption. You call it the reason you were warm in the rain. The second property is water resistance. Raw and minimally processed wool contains lanolin, a natural wax secreted by the sheep's own skin glands. Lanolin causes water to bead on the surface of the fiber rather than soaking through. Condensation, the primary cause of sleeping bag failure in cold, enclosed tents, rolls off a wool surface. It soaks into a synthetic shell immediately. The third property is the one that closes the loop on everything. Wool retains approximately 80% of its insulating value when fully saturated with water. The reason is structural. Wool grows in a natural crimp, a spiral shape in each individual fiber that functions like a coiled spring. The crimp traps air between the fibers. Air is insulation. The crimp holds the air in place even when the fiber is wet. Down sleeping bags saturated with condensation retain almost none of their insulation. Synthetic fill bags lose the majority. A fully saturated wool blanket, wrung out by hand, still keeps a human body warm enough to survive. That is why every member of that crew was alive at dawn on the coast of Newfoundland. Most people who try to replicate what those crews did get one step wrong. It is the first step. It is not the blanket weight. It is not the wool grade. It is the layering sequence. Get it backwards, and you lose the benefit of everything the fiber does. Here is what you need. A wool blanket. That is it. A used one from a thrift store costs between $5 and $15. Check the label. 70% wool content minimum. 100% is better. The coarser the weave, the more loft. The more loft, the more air trapped between the fibers. The more air trapped, the warmer you sleep. That is genuinely it. No zipper, no fill rating, no proprietary insulation technology. A rectangle of dense wool approximately 150 centimeters by 200 centimeters. That is roughly 5 feet by 6.5 feet in non-metric terms. If the blanket you find is smaller than this, 2 of them will outperform most mid-range sleeping bags in any wet condition. Here is the one thing most people get wrong. They use the wool blanket as a blanket. They lay it over themselves and wrap the edges loosely around their sides. That approach works at 10 degrees Celsius. It does not work at -5. The difference between a sleeping system and a blanket is not the material, it is whether your body heat has a way out. Norse crews on the Gokstad-class vessels did not lay under their vadmal. They got inside it. The cloth was folded around the body, sides tucked firmly beneath, foot end sealed. Lisa Bender-Jurgensen's textile analysis documents vadmal folded into a closed system for sleeping, rather than used as a draped cover. The Skådelev ships excavated at the Roskilde Ship Museum in Denmark, dated by dendrochronology to between 1000 and 1030 CE, show evidence of compact, folded personal textile storage at dedicated deck positions, consistent with sealed sleeping systems rather than loose covers. The physical principle behind this is called dead air insulation. Your body generates roughly 80 watts of heat while you sleep. That is approximately the output of a lamp burning on a desk. If that heat has a gap to escape through, it escapes in minutes, and you spend the night shivering. If it does not have a way out, it compounds inside the system, and you wake up warm. The folded and sealed wool blanket holds every watt your body produces. The heat of sorption adds more. The lanolin resists the condensation that would otherwise drain it away. Here is how to set it up. Lay the blanket flat on the ground. Position yourself on one half of it lengthwise, with the fabric extending roughly 30 centimeters above your head and 30 centimeters below your feet. Fold the other half directly over the top of you. Tuck the foot end under. Not loosely, firmly. Press it beneath your feet and calves so there is no gap. Then work the side edges under your body from the foot end upward, pushing the fabric beneath you as you go, until both sides are tucked from your feet to your shoulders. You are not wrapping yourself, you are sealing a system. The exact arrangement a Norse crewman used on the deck of a ship the night before a crossing. Not draped, sealed. The same fabric that was a sail in the afternoon becomes a sealed sleeping system at night. The next step is the one most people skip. It is also the one that separated a Norse crew that made landfall from one that did not. Before you lie down, air the blanket. Hold it open in a breeze for 2 to 3 minutes if you are outside, or shake it firmly 5 or 6 times if you are inside. This resets the loft. Compressed wool insulates at roughly half the value of aired wool. That loss is not recovered by body heat alone. Start with the loft collapsed, and you will be cold for the first hour and may not recover the warmth you need. The Skådelev textile evidence shows Vadmal used alternately as sail and sleeping cover. The same piece of fabric, aired between uses before being redeployed. This was not a hygiene habit, it was a thermal one. Lie down, pull the top edge tight against your chin. The neck seal is the single most important point in the entire system. More body heat escapes through a neck gap than through any other failure point in a sleeping arrangement. Take the excess wool above your head, that 30 centimeter overhang, and fold it loosely around your neck from the outside. Or tuck a folded corner of the blanket, a wool hat, or a wool sweater sleeve between your chin and the outside air. Now wait 8 minutes. That is the test, not a temperature rating on a tag, not a proprietary fill number. 8 minutes inside a correctly sealed wool system in cold, still air. You will feel warmth accumulating around your core. That is the heat of sorption working in real time. Your breath and body moisture contacting the inner wool surface, absorbed by the fiber, and released as heat back toward your skin. Feel that within 8 minutes, and the system is performing correctly. If you do not feel it, the neck seal has a gap. That is the failure point in more than 90% of cases. Fix the neck seal. Wait 4 more minutes. You just built what every Norse sailor crossing the North Atlantic relied on for open ocean winter survival. The setup took 10 minutes. The cost was the price of a thrift store blanket. This channel documents exactly this. Techniques with 1,000 years of ocean survival testing behind them, available to anyone who knows the source. Subscribe and turn on the bell. One person using this system survives 1 cold night. What a family of 4 does with the same material. And what the Norse settlement at Lance aux Meadows did with this principle when housing an entire winter crew in Newfoundland changes how you think about the cost of staying warm for the rest of your life. For a family of 4 blankets at thrift store prices cost between $20 and $60 total. One purchase, no replacement cycle. A wool blanket maintained correctly does not compress with seasons of use the way synthetic fill does. It does not lose its insulation rating year over year. Wool blankets held in Scandinavian folk museum collections, some dating to the 18th century, still insulate. The fiber structure does not degrade the way manufactured fill does. At the scale of the Lance aux Meadows settlement, Brigitte Lindroth Wallace's 2003 Parks Canada report estimates the site housed between 60 and 90 individuals through at least 1 full winter in Newfoundland. An entire colonial crew kept warm through a Canadian maritime winter with temperatures that would today require thousands of dollars of gear per person if you were buying synthetic solutions. No procurement system, no supply chain, no bill at the end of the season, no bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. There is one condition where the system works less efficiently than in most situations. Norse crews knew it and built their approach to account for it. The way they solved it is the last thing in the script. That condition is sustained submersion. Not rain, not condensation, not morning dew. A wave breaking directly over the sleeping position, soaking the entire system completely before anyone can respond. In that condition, wool still retains 80% of its insulation, but it becomes heavy. A fully saturated wool blanket can weigh 3 to 4 times its dry weight. And that added weight against a body already cooling slows the rewarming process in a way that matters. The Gokstad burial textiles include not only vadmel, but evidence of outer hide layers. Seal skin or oiled hide used as the outermost layer of the sleeping system in exposed, open ocean conditions. The hide sheds bulk water before it reaches the wool. The wool manages the condensation and vapor underneath it. Together, as documented in the textile analysis of the Gokstad burial goods, they form a layered system that handles submersion, where wool alone takes time to recover from. If you're sleeping in conditions with real submersion risk, ocean kayaking, coastal camping, open water sailing, where a wave over the deck is a genuine possibility, a piece of oilcloth large enough to wrap around the outside of the system replicates the hide layer directly. It costs under $20 at any marine supply store. It is not part of the basic system for most situations. For cold weather camping, emergency shelter, power outages, or overland travel, the wool blanket alone performs exactly as described. The outer layer is the upgrade for open water only. The Gokstad ship still sits in the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo. Its hull is intact after 1,100 years in Norwegian soil. The wool textile fragments recovered from that burial have survived. The physics that made them work in 890 CE still operates in a blanket on your shelf tonight. It does not care what the gear catalogs decided in 1910. It does not care how many synthetic alternatives have been marketed since then. The heat of sorption still fires every time moisture meets that fiber. And it works either way. I do not know what brought you here tonight. Maybe the sleeping bag in your closet has a broken zipper and you have a trip in 2 weeks. Maybe the forecast where you live shows 3 days of power outages and sub-zero temperatures, and you're thinking about what you actually have available. Maybe you just wanted to know whether the people who crossed the North Atlantic in open wooden boats with no instruments and no rescue were actually smarter about this than 100 years of gear catalogs give them credit for. They were. The wool is still the same. It works either way.